The second day of Stage 2 of the Overwatch League 2019 season took place last night, with 4 competitive and insightful games that have begun to highlight which teams are the ones to watch out for this stage, as well as the overall meta that most teams are starting to run. So let's get straight into what went down. Day 2 was kicked off by the London Spitfire taking on the now Korean only Florida Mayhem. Going into the first map on Control Lijiang, both teams largely stuck to Woats and Sombra Goats, and it was clear from the off that in this matchup, London clearly had the advantage, so they took map 1 with relative ease. But going into map 2 on Hanamura, we finally saw the Mayhem's bunker comp, which the Spitfire severely struggled against whilst running a Pharah and Hanzo, as Florida burnt a lot of time off the clock, in part thanks to some well-timed immortality fields from Hagapon that saved his Bastion and Orisa. With London only finishing the map with 30 seconds left, a good push here could really set the Mayhem up for victory, and this is what they did as they blitzed through point A before their Goats comp managed to overcome the Spitfire on B and give them a massive time bank advantage. London could do nothing on their attack, and in the end the Goats comp of Florida finally managed to break through and capture the first tick on A to take the map and level the series at the half 1-1. Coming back onto Eichenwald, all the momentum seemed to be with Florida as they methodically made their way through the map on attack, speeding through the first 2 checkpoints before London were finally able to put up some resistance at the end. But it came too late as the Mayhem finished the map impressively with over a minute still remaining. London on the other hand, whilst managing to make their way through the map, were far scrappier and sloppier and had to rely on key ultimates and overtime fights just to crawl over the line in the end. This gave Florida over a minute to capture the first point, but their feats on Hanamura couldn't be repeated as a solid Spitfire defense stalled their opponents, leading to a map draw and a must-win Game 4. Woats was the order of the day on Gibraltar, and it seemed to heavily favour the defending side, with London seemingly turning the screw on victory as they had little trouble in holding the payload to before the first point. The Mayhem, however, came out fighting as well, and it wasn't until the last 30 seconds that Spitfire's high level of quality came to fruition, as they squeaked out the map and took the series 2-1. London were clearly more comfortable when playing Woats, but they were lucky to come out this series with a win. Florida, meanwhile, looked to validate their all-Korean roster decision, with the team looking both impressive on Baptiste bunker comps and improved on Goats, but it's a game they'll feel they should have won. Game 2 saw the Washington Justice and new player Arc take on the Toronto Defiant. It appeared as though everything was in order after the first 2 maps, with Toronto for the most part being in control, whether on Goats or triple DPS, although it was noticeable that Arc was having a solid game for the much improved Justice, with Corey early on finally being allowed to show his quality on DPS. The Defiant went into the half 2-0 up after Washington couldn't break down their bunker comp, with Neko particularly time and time again coming in clutch with perfectly timed immortality fields to protect his Bastion from dragon strikes. Washington knew they needed to win Blizzard World to have a chance of a reverse sweep, but following Toronto's attack, this looked unlikely, as they finished the map with little time to spare, following a fast push through the first 2 checkpoints behind the subbed in I'm 37, with a very impressive outing on DPS. In the end, the Justice was stopped just short as a combination of ultimates, including Envy's EMP, cleaned up the final fight, guaranteeing the Defiant the victory. This left Junktown to be played, and unsurprisingly, the Baptiste pirate ship led us out, with Ivy at times able to combo with the amplification shield to deal huge amounts of damage. But throughout this map, it just seemed that the Justice held the advantage on both attack and defense, as they were able to stall the payload in many places, partly in thanks to Corey's Widow that was absolutely popping off all game. Toronto failed to finish the map and could do little to prevent the powerful onslaught from Washington, who highlighted their improvement with a map win at the end in their 3-1 loss, which I think both sides will be content with, as it gives them solid starts to Stage 2. The LA Valiant sought their first win of the season against the San Francisco Shock, and to no one's surprise, they failed to achieve this. Simply, the Shock ran over the Valiant for most of the series, with perhaps the most dominant display coming on Anubis, where Rascal showed a great level of quality with Baptiste, and Super evaporated a couple of players with an amplified Firestrike. Down 2-0 at the half, even those with a faint hope that the new meta would bring in some surprises quickly expected the streak would continue to 8 games for the Valiant, with the only positives being that Custer was back in the starting lineup, and KSF performed admirably, both on DPS and on Zarya. But with that quick aside out of the way, we returned to complete dominance on Blizzard World, where San Francisco reached their target with ease to guarantee the series. LA fans still watching saw their team go from bad to worse on Gibraltar, as they spent a lot of the time getting out of spawn, with Sinatra grabbing off of spawn camp, and a super shatter completed the first point hold for the Shock, who 2 minutes into their own attack finally got the teamfight win they needed to lock up the very simple 4-0 sweep and establish themselves as top dogs once more. The concluding game of the second day promised to be a very close and entertaining series as the LA Gladiators took on the Seoul Dynasty, and it did not disappoint. The first thing to note was that Fletter had been dropped to the bench on the side of the Dynasty in favour of Fitz after some impressive performances last stage, as the rest of the A team took to the stage. Map 1 was very one-sided, as Seoul came out with purpose, as Fisher and Fitz took complete control of the map on Oasis, with a dominating performance, as LA looked to be struggling to find an answer to the woes of the Dynasty, only capping 22% across 2 rounds, as Seoul took an early map lead. However, Map 2 on Paris exposed a severe weakness for the Dynasty, which was both their apparent inability to play, but also play against the Baptiste bunker comp. Having only just managed to take point A following a huge EMP, they could not get past the Gladiators' defense, who subsequently blitzed through their attack as they didn't have to face the bunker comp themselves, to level the series at 1-1. Again, on King's Row, this weakness was once again Seoul's downfall, as the LA defense took up so much time that in the end they couldn't match what had been a makeable defense after a solid hole at the end from the Dynasty. Gibraltar was a must-win for them now, and both sides were very even across this map, with overtime pushes needed to break the deadlock. In the end, Seoul won the teamfight when it mattered, to level the series and take us to Game 5. Going into Lijiang, twice it looked like the Dynasty had the upper hand, before great engagements from the Gladiators took the point away from them at the end, to win 2 consecutive rounds, and win the map, and thus the series 3-2. The series win shows that the Gladiators are gunning for the playoffs this time round, while Seoul will know that they were probably the better team for the larger part of the game, but seriously need to address the bunker comp issue moving forward. Now looking at my predictions, it would be fair to say that I absolutely nailed them, getting 4 out of 4 right to take my weekly total to 7-1, but also was 1 London map away from getting every single scoreline right as well. And to that point, the London series was the only one that really surprised me, with Florida playing far better than I anticipated, and arguably could have actually won the series in the end. Mentioning the Florida mayhem, they kick us off in what should now, after an impressive display against London, be a very competitive series against the Philadelphia Fusion, but I reckon will go a distance to a map 5, which just looking at history tells you that Philly will just edge it out in the end 3-2. Following this, Toronto Defiant take on the Boston Uprising, and I expect this to also be a very close matchup. But I think that after seeing their Baptiste play, that the Defiant will be able to overcome RCK and Boston in a nail-biting 3-2 win. After these 2 potentially close series, I reckon that a blowout will be witnessed in Game 3, as I'm predicting the New York Excelsior to comfortably 4-0 the Shanghai Dragons, after showing they were back in business against the Fusion. This before a hugely entertaining conclusion that sees the Chengdu Hunters take on the Paris Eternal. I thought prior to this stage that this meta would suit Chengdu and not Paris, but the Eternal showed that I potentially was wrong in this assumption after an impressive and dominating sweep of the charge. That said, I'm still going to stick to my guns and go with a 3-2 Chengdu victory to round off Saturday. With that, we've reached the end of my Day 2 review and Day 3 preview, and I hope you enjoyed. As usual, I'll be back again tomorrow to recap Saturday's games before looking ahead to the conclusion of the week on Sunday, so be sure to please like and subscribe so you don't miss out.